Hello! I've just read chapter 16 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight, and again, there's not really a whole lot to talk about this chapter. We see basically Jax and Naranth pay Rocco a visit, and Jax is able to convince Rocco that he's willing to forget their troubles with the Syrian, and Rocco sending stormtroopers after him if he's willing to let it go as well. And he explains that he needs help finding Bug Eyes, and that Jax winds up saying he'll need Rocco to hand over Bug Eyes to the Empire because he can't hand it over to Vader or the Emperor himself because they'll know he's a Jedi, they'll sense the Force, so he needs Rocco to hand it over, and there's lots of credits to be won by doing that, and of course it's been established that Rocco loves his credits. So Rocco, he he winds up agreeing and says that he could just send Jax and Naranth because Jax introduces him and Naranth as Jedi um when they're waiting to come in, and they introduce themselves as Jedi to the droids waiting outside. He says that he could just hand them over to Vader. The credits aren't a lot. There aren't a lot of credits to be won by handing them over, it's it's a little effort. And Jax sort of feel a bit of relief, but he does make it clear that that the effort isn't as easy as he thinks. And Rocco asks for asks Akubas for his usual and to bring some Corellian ale, and Jax looks over to Larenth and can see that she's thinking the same thing as him, which is Rocco is will as soon as possible, backstab them, get the credits all for himself rather than share the rewards, because of course he's after all those credits. Jax admits that he'll have to find a way to get admits to himself that he'll have to find a way to get the Hutts out the deal, but that's a matter for when they actually find the droids, because Rocco has lots of resources in the underworld, and the Jedi, of course, have the Force to help them find the droids. So again, that's why the car went to Rocco. Rocco is very has a lot of resources to use in the underworld and etc. Um, so now I'm just going to kind of talk about some of the character stuff in this. It, we get to see a bit more of Jax here. I'm going to talk about Jax real quick. There's not really a whole lot to say on Jax. But we're kind of starting to see a bit more of who he is. We're seeing that he's a bit bold, a little bit more risky. Um, it was a very bold decision to introduce himself and Larenth as Jedi. He could have just introduced himself as a Jedi, but no, he introduced Larenth as a Paladin. And Rocco knew that she was a Jedi, I guess, just based on that. And Jax could see that Larenth was a little bit uncomfortable with that, again, a little bit tense. Because even though Jax is a Jedi, and she knows him, she's only met him a handful of times, and she knows that some Jedi can go bad, and we're told that Jax is counting on Rocco knowing that, so that's going to be interesting to see what that plays up later on in the book, because it's not really played upon here. But Jax sends some waves in the Force over to Larenth to try and calm her down, and again we can't again just Jax introduced him both not only himself but Larenth as Jedi, because Rocco did know that Larenth was a Jedi and presumably because he probably is aware of the Grey Paladins, probably. That's the only way I can really fathom why he immediately assumed that Larenth was a Jedi. Um, but yeah, it was a very bold decision for for Jax to do that. So we're seeing a little bit of that coming through. We also see like diplomacy coming through as well, his diplomatic side. So and how he's thinking ahead, but he's not putting future problems in the forefront just yet. Kind of just pulling it so it's once it matters, he'll do that. Which again, it's little things like that that are starting to show us a bit more of Jax's character. Again, we still don't know a whole lot about who he is as a person, but we're starting to learn a bit more. Labyrinth, again, we see how she's a bit uncomfortable when she's warm when Jax introduces them as Jedi. Again, we don't learn a whole lot about Labyrinth's personality in this chapter. There's not really a whole lot that's said that she does in this chapter, honestly. But yeah. Oh, there was another bit at the start of the chapter when they're making their way over to Rocco's place, and Jax says stuff like, "Well, they will knock because of manners," and that's another thing with Jax coming through there, where he's still being polite even though Rocco's tries to have him killed, and I think you can kind of tell there's I think there's a little bit of humour coming through with Jax. I think there's a little bit of humour trying to come through, and I think you can just tell Labyrinth is just not into that humour. She just isn't very impressed with the humour at all. But Jack, I think you can kind of just see that Jax is still saying it just for his own pleasure. So yeah, it's definitely not. It's no, it definitely seems like while it could be humour, it definitely could just be a general thing, and I think it's small humour. It's not something that's meant to get a smile out of you or laugh. It's just something to kind of brighten up the situation that they're in. And again, unlike something like Master of the Jedi, where there was a lot of good humour in that book that would make you laugh. Here, it's more to kind of lighten up the situation, and again, not to try and make you laugh, but just to make the situation feel better and more comfortable. And again, you can kind of see that coming through with Jax here. So yeah. We also got a little bit more on Rocco, on how Jax keeps being surprised by Rocco in this chapter. He sees windows that look to be looking into the past of Nal Hutta, and we're told it was created by an old Hutt artist who had died before Rocco was born. And Rocco's, so Jax has heard, is about 400 years old. And Rocco looks at it with nostalgia, and we're told that eventually the windows and the scenery of Nal Hutta there will eventually fade away and be gone. And he's looking at them with quite a bit of nostalgia. And there are some moments in the chapter where it's noticed that Rocco has a bit of sadness in his voice, and it's quite interesting considering how we've already had the theme of trying to go home with Kate, and now we're kind of having an almost not the same theme, not trying to go home, but a homely theme with Rocco in this chapter. Even, no matter, it was a very brief moment, but we're getting the same homely longing with Rocco here. And it definitely, and I think you can kind of see a lot of homecoming in this book. I5 looking for Jax Pavan, who is the son of his previous owner, who could be considered a home. You got, I had another thing in my mind for a moment. Now it's gone. But yeah, there's definitely quite a few bits of homecoming in this book now that I'm thinking about it. So it's quite interesting. Quite interesting. But yeah, I don't have much else to say on this chapter aside from I enjoyed it. It did get a bit exposition heavy in the details of Rocco's home. Um, I think there was like a page or two that just went into the details of what Rocco's home is Connacht is like, but it wasn't that bad. Compared to other chapters, it wasn't that bad. Um, but yeah, I really enjoy this chapter. It looks like next time we'll be picking up with Nick. So yeah, well, that brings an end to this review. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Also, it's great to see a bit more of Jax's character coming through, because I've been saying we need to know more who Jax is. Hello, I've just read chapter 17 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. So we're picking back up with Nick, who's waking up in a smuggling ship. And it takes him a little bit to kind of figure out that he's in the ship. And we're told that he didn't get shot. he got hit on the head by the slug thrower. So at least he hasn't gotten shot in the back, At least he hasn't had anything like that yet. He's been hit on the head and he's got a big bruise on there, but at least he hasn't had anything that's pierced into him this time. And there's quite a few things he says in this chapter which definitely feels very much like Nick. From what I read in Mindor, it definitely feels very much like Nick now. When a week where he comes over after he gets her attention, and he picks up Nick, and he's got force cuffs on, so he can't walk, he can't move his arms without them stinging. And there's a very Nick moment where he's picked up and he starts to feel like he needs to vomit. He's trying to hold it in, and then you realises, hold on, this isn't my ship, and he just lets it all out. And he goes over the Weequay's boots, who's called Mock. And the Weequay's about to punch Nick before the human co-pilot, before the other pilots, who's a human, says to calm down, not hit Nick. And his last name's Coven. What was his first name? Drac Coven. And he's actually quite nice. Even though he's a smuggler who's taken Nick hostage for some money, of course. He's actually quite nice. No, he's quite nice to Nick and very polite. And even Nick's a bit confused, because even though he seems like a low life, the way he talks, he sounds like he's from an upper class. So even Nick's thrown off by it. Mouse droid comes to clear everything up. To clear up, of course, the mess. And Mock eventually comes back with his boots cleaned up. And we're told that Mock is very proud of his boots. And again, Coven continues saying that, does not have any hard feelings over capturing Nick, over Nick being captured, and that, he's got to he's got to keep the ship running, and he's got expenses to pay. And Nick makes the remark saying probably off black market fuel, and Coven says, "Oh, a killer," judging on the marketeers, etc. We reminded that Nick has a death mark on his head from the Empire for killing a high-ranking official or killing a high-level representative, in the Empire. And he, of course, escaped and deserted. So yeah. Anyway, they eventually get over to the palace, the Imperial Palace, and they turn over Nick. And Rahinian's there to greet them alongside a giving and some stormtroopers, and we're finally given a description of Rahinian's outfit, Tyke's outfit, whatever you want to call him. We just told he's wearing expensive robes. So I'm kind of imagining red, luxurious robes that he's seen. And the giving hands Coven their payments, and Coven salutes them, and says it's a pleasure doing business with them. And he's about to go when the stormtroopers raise their blasters, and Mahinian announces that they've turned in a fugitive of the they've turned in a wanted fugitive, and now because of their crimes, because they are smugglers, they're now under arrest. And Mock gets very frustrated and hits the stormtrooper, knocking them off the feet. And it's about to hit another when he gets some shot in the back. So someone does get shot in the back, I guess. But this one isn't a lethal round; it's just a stun round. It knocks him unconscious. And Rahinian tells his Given, the Given also, once he gave the money back to gave the money to Coven. Once Rahinian announced that they're under arrest, he just took the money back. So that was quite funny. That was quite funny. But Rahinian says that, to impound the two smugglers' ship. And he says to release Rostu from the cuffs, and that sparks a bit of hope for Rostu that he's gonna get out. And then Rahinian tells the Given to send him to Vader right away. And that completely kills all of Nick's hope, and he's immediately just, what does Vader want with him? And he gets a very bad feeling. And it looks like next chapter we're picking up with Dender and I5. Which again, again, they're all, Dender and I5 are great to see. Throughout this book, I haven't been entirely sure on how Nick's been characterized. It felt close to Nick, but I wasn't entirely sure if he was quite there yet. This chapter kind of solidifies that, yeah, this is definitely Nick. Michael Reeves got his character down to a T. I can't quite describe Nick, but it's just some of the stuff he says, some of the stuff he does, you can just tell that's Nick right there. And, like vomiting on the ship, realising it's not his own ship and thinking, no, whatever, it's not my ship, they can clean it up. That feels very much like Nick. Like the Nick we know from Shadows of Mentor. Again, I have to keep saying Mentor because I haven't read Shatterpoint. But yeah, it very much feels like Nick. In this chapter. And you also can feel his despair in this chapter about how he's trying to think of how to escape the ship, but anything that comes to mind involves him in a scenario where he's not in force cuffs, and he's in force cuffs, so none of them are able to work. Drock Coven, he was actually quite... He's an intriguing character, and I think we're going to see more of him as well. But he's an intriguing character. Just because of how polite and kind and pleasant he is. Usually it's when we see like bounty hunters and smugglers and so on, so generally, just more just focused on the work. But Drock is trying to make conversation with Nick, and is again being quite polite and pleasant with him, and it's very interesting. It's a very different feel. And it's a very different feel to his character compared to other smugglers and bounty hunters. He has a very distinct feel, and I think we're going to see more of Coven and Drock Coven and Mock. I have a feeling they all may have something to do with Nick as getting out of the palace. But yeah, it's gonna. I think we're gonna see them again. I don't think they would have just introduced them, and then had them come under arrest only for them to not appear again. I think they would have just been let to fly away otherwise. And I think that would have just indicated, okay, we're not probably going to see them again. But even them just being named, it still feels a bit, okay, that feels like we may see them again. But yeah, Drock was quite interesting. Just because he feels like a very different character, especially even in just this book alone. We haven't really seen a very polite character like him. I mean, we kind of had I5, but he's more oblivious polite. I5 is a bit, is almost oblivious in some aspects, but you know, he's not completely oblivious. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's just there's just something about Coven that is quite interesting and intriguing. I don't think this is the last we've seen of him. And it was also again nice to get some description of Rahinian, of what Rahinian is wearing, and the whole interaction between Rahinian and the smugglers, the two smugglers, was just honestly quite enjoyable. Once Rahinian said that you know, that they're under arrest because it's the lip the given takes the money back, which, you know, you can just imagine if that was like an episode of a show, you know, that would have been an extremely hilarious thing to just watch. And it was very funny to just picture as well. There was, yeah, just that whole interaction was quite funny. It looks like we're picking back up with Den and I5 next chapter. It's going to be very interesting to see you know, what they're up to now. Now that they're trying to match the face, now that they got a match on Jax, on someone who looks a bit like Jax Pavan, and he's Jax Pavan. I'm trying to remember how much do they know? Oh yeah, they're trying to follow Jax using the security grid. Right, I forgot. um, were they able to get a match? Sorry, this is must be sound very annoying and off topic. I've gone too far. That's chapter 14. Yeah, they weren't able to find Jax. Okay, I was mixing it up with Rahinian's search. Um, uh, Rahinian wasn't able to identify whether wasn't able to see Jax's face, but was able to see Nick's face. Den and I5 were the ones who saw Jack's face. Sorry. That I thought they were going to be looking for Nick. Den and I5 were going to be looking for Nick for a moment. It was that completely confused me. Okay, so they found a match to Jax's face, and now they're trying to. I guess they're trying to follow the droids on the scan grid as they're looking for Jax. So yeah, that okay, that sorry, that completely went off. I completely forgot for a moment. I haven't been keeping notes. Maybe I should start doing that for this book because I keep forgetting. Um, but yeah, yeah. Okay, 10 and I5 are great. They're great to read. So next chapter is going to be an entertaining one. Is there anything else I want to say on this chapter? I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I do want to say. Yeah, nothing else. So I think that's probably going to do it for this review. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. But also, at least Nick didn't get shot in the back this time.